So when we talk about the material, like we know how the brain works, we know what methods to use, and now we need to talk about the compilation of materials. We have to remember the principle of 3 C's. Number 1 is consistency. If you go with us till the end of our journey, you will see that we consistently use the same symbols. And the symbols make your students build very accurate phrases. And that is how they develop accuracy in speaking. Then, of course, we try to compile all materials into the categories. Categories have to have any kind of relationship between each other. So the categories may describe each other, they may add something, they may talk about the motion, like the actions, the activities, but still it's much better to use the categories for learning, because then we can talk about different things and it will have a number of combinations. For example, the animal looks like this, the sounds the animal makes, the actions the animal can do, and so on and so forth. And that is how we give the categories, and then that is how we can combine them. And finally, connections. The more connections we can find, the better it is for your student's brain. Even simplest connections, like he goes to the shops, so he is a shopper, like in the development of language awareness, will help your students remember more words. So let's start with consistency. First of all, we keep using the same symbols for all parts of speech during almost the whole course of teaching and learning. You see here on the scheme that the adjective is symbolized by a diamond or a rhombus. The noun answering the question who is usually an oval. Also, there is a verb, which is an arrow, and other nouns, which are secondary parts of speech, will be symbolized by a rectangle. The adverb is a trapezoid, and finally, any important detail will be in a star, for example, a preposition or a question word. These symbols allow building sentences. For example, these are two schemes for present simple, for the verb to be, and for other verbs, action verbs in present simple. We see that here the nouns answering the question who, people, are represented by red bubbles. The verbs are represented by the arrows, and the arrows have two colors. The deep blue symbolizes the main verb, while the light blue is for auxiliary verbs, and all other parts of the sentence are in green, and that is how we may build a sentence in present, in positive and negative. Also, we can ask the questions using this scheme. For example, she is a student. What is she? Or I am fine. How are you? Or I do my homework. What do you do? The same tenses may be combined in a bigger scheme and explained the same way, but this scheme is constantly referred to. It is always in all our classrooms, and that is how we keep practicing tenses all the time. Other idea of consistency is in word building. Word building is very important, and if we practice it all the time, it not only develops vocabulary, it also helps developing language awareness. You see that here the same symbols are used for the verbs to illustrate, illustrated, illustrated, but we distinguish verb 1, verb 2, and verb 3, like all three forms of the verb. Also, the third participle, the verb in the third form or participle 2 is explained as when the action was done at, like illustrated, being illustrated. That is why here we can think of it as of an adjective, so it is also given in a rhombus, in a diamond shape, and other parts of the word family are presented in a bubble, illustrator, which is obviously a person, and the tools answering the question what. Illustrator is a tool, and two nouns, illustrativity and illustration, plus illustrating as a gerund answering the question doing what. Though this part is rather difficult for the people who teach young kids, we will be constantly referring to this idea of consistency in our other courses. Also, categorization is important. When we think of categories, you remember that categories help promoting vocabulary, but categories are not the same during all stages of learning. Of course, we place everything into the categories in our brain, but the question is, what are the most important categories, and how do we choose categories for the kids to learn and for us to teach? First of all, when we think about anything, we can think of the categories which can be compiled into the following map. For example, if we think of something and it's in a rectangle with a question, we can think of the group it belongs to. We can also think of its parts, and we can give some idea about its characteristics, and also we can talk about a human and how a human relates to this or that thing. For example, if we think of a table, we will think of furniture as a group, then parts of the table such as legs, and we can define the table using color, then material, its shape, purpose. We can talk about humans and how they relate to this table, and also later we can talk about climate, weather, but that will be much later. So these topics can be spread during the whole course of learning, and at the elementary level we usually deal with the nominative parts of the topic. So usually we talk about a word, and we explain the parts of the word, what group this word belongs to. Then we can define the word, we can describe it, and also we can talk about some activities that this object makes. For example, a table stands, a table is for something. So that is what happens at the elementary level. Later, when our students are in the 6th, 7th grade, we start talking about humans, meaning we talk about different types of users, we talk about their needs, we also define our habits, and that is how students are able to see themselves in this world. And later, we shift the focus to climate and history, and we can explain, for example, adaptations, how humans live in different types of environment, how humans act in different types of environment, what they need, for example, for traveling, in different types of environment, and so on and so forth. While talking about the categories for elementary level, it is important to understand that these categories may be chosen according to some pattern. The pattern that we use is the order of adjectives. If we talk about the order of adjectives, that means that we probably need to know the adjectives. So we teach our kids shape, size, age, color, origin, material, and purpose. You will find all these details in our courses. And also they can talk about their opinion of this or that object. And this is how we build the topics, and this is how the topic map looks like. This topic map is describing clothes. It divides all clothes into the meaningful categories. Each category may be studied separately or become a part of one level. For example, at level 1, we will be studying just some very simple items of clothing. And if we look at this map closer, we'll see that also it promotes word building skills because the roots of some words are underlined, and that is how we can ask our students to paraphrase. So this map is almost the same as we see in the classroom, and it is in the student's portfolio. But if we want to add syntax, we will use symbols for the parts of sentences, and we will group speaking into the speaking map. So this speaking map on describing clothes includes basic categories such as size, color. They are basic categories. They are what we call the expanding vocabulary. We can use this vocabulary with many topics. And also, talking about clothes, we can define here such categories as patterns, so materials. Also, we can talk about the body parts. We wear this or that clothing item on. We can talk about the seasons and the weather where these clothes are worn. Also, if you look at this speaking map closely, you will see that it promotes questions. For example, the category is size. We can say these trousers are big. But also we can ask a question, and the question will be, what size are the trousers? So when we make these maps, we always keep in mind that we have to consistently use the thinking skills which help recycling all the material. And that is how we look for connections, and that is how we can talk about different important matters. So the thinking skills that we practice from the very beginning are description. We describe things with the help of the order of adjectives. We will be talking about chronology when we start using past tenses. We can classify, for example, what this clothing item belongs to, nightwear or homewear or outerwear. We can compare and contrast. And finally, we can talk about cause and effect, starting with the very simple ideas. For example, he is a baker, so he works at the bakery. Or this is the outerwear, so we wear it when we go out. These connections help our students become more aware of the language, and that is how the 3 principles of compiling materials, consistency, categories, and connections are used with interclass.